the formation of the world's first Green Party. This oration, the Green Oration, has been thought about and developed as marking the fact that this places Tasmania in a global context in terms of driving some of the world's great ideas. We drove the green political movement, and now we continue to drive it both here and around the world. We've had 3 previous orations. The first was by David Suzuki, and then many of you will have come to hear Ingrid Betancourt, and of course our own Bob Brown. And tonight, in that list of leading global thinkers, we have Nobel laureate Professor Schmidt, and so we of course welcome you to Tasmania and to Hobart. Professor Schmidt, of course, as he will no doubt talk about tonight, knows a great deal about dark energy, and I think I got some insight into the beginnings of that this week. Could I ask you, before we get started for the evening, if you would make sure your mobile phones are turned off, please. I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that we are meeting on Aboriginal land and acknowledge the Muhanina people, their elders, past and present. And I'd also like to say how proud the Greens are of the fact that as part of our agreement with the Gillard government, we, after 2010, was to work towards constitutional recognition of Australia's Indigenous people. Unfortunately, it's not going to go to a referendum at this year's federal election, but it was felt that you needed to have tripartite support to get the referendum up, and of course we would not proceed in any way until we were confident that we would actually be successful. But the Greens have driven that, and that's why we now have a Recognition Act, and we will certainly work towards achieving that as soon as we possibly can. But it's now my job to introduce tonight's MC. In many ways, he needs no introduction to Tasmanian audiences, and that, of course, is our own Bob Brown. Bob has been a leading thinker, has been part of the Green movement since the very beginning, since the United Tasmania Group days, and since leaving federal politics, he's taken his enormous commitment and energy, national and global. He has been the face of the campaign with the Sea Shepherd over this last summer in terms of working towards saving the whales, that fantastic nursery up off James Price Point in Western Australia, and he continues to campaign tirelessly for the environment, for the cultural heritage, for the beauty of the Kimberley, and of course our fellow species. So I could think of no one better to introduce Professor Schmidt tonight than our own Bob Brown. Welcome, Bob.
And maybe I should mention somebody who's not with us because he can't be, and that is Paul Watson, the founder of Sea Shepherd, who's floating off these shores but outside territorial waters tonight, because in his efforts to uphold international law, he is threatened with prison by the people who are breaking the law, the Japanese whaling fleet. And if there's ever a wrong headed towards being implemented through inactivity by other governments, that's it. But I've spoke to Paul just the other day, and I know he'd love to be here with us, and I take my hat off to one of the great environmentalists of the last century who's been pursued because he's the upholder of global environmental law. The Australian courts have ruled that the Japanese whaling is illegal and issued an injunction against it proceeding, and you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, what would happen if you or I were to breach an injunction from the Federal Court of Australia. I want to, at the outset, thank folk who put particular effort into getting us here tonight, including Karen Brown, who's been very special in she's been held by Michelle O'Toole, Stephen Chaffer, Mark Doldig, John Gibson from Plants of Australia, Tanya Stadler, the Young Green Volunteers who are here tonight and who saw us in, the Tasmanian Greens volunteer, and John Sampson, who's done a lot of the work in publicity that's given us such good profile. I also want to acknowledge, besides Christine, we've got a wealth of senators. Peter Wish-Wilson, who's our Green Senator for Tasmania. Christine said I was a thinker. Well, I thunk, therefore I was, but as far as the Senate's concerned. But we now have Peter with us tonight, and I don't think this is the last Peter. And we have with us also Senator Rachel Seward from Western Australia. Where are you, Rach? Right here. And we also have Senator Larissa Waters from Queensland, Green Senator from Queensland. Hi, Larissa. Our local MPs, Green MPs, Ministers Nick McKim and Cassie O'Connor, and also Paul O'Halloran with us tonight. So, and quite a lot of local government councillors. And I'll ask the next ones to stand up because they're up-and-coming Greens MPs. Firstly, we have Rosalie Woodruff, who's the candidate for Franklin, up the back there. Anna Reynolds, who'll be our candidate for Denison. We've got Penelope Ann, who's on the Senate ticket with Peter. Who's going to be the candidate for Canberra. And Tom Baxter, who's the candidate for Nelson in the upcoming... Don't fail to get your car sticker. I got in early for Tom as you're leaving. They're at the door tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the United Tasmania Group was the world's first Greens party. And on the 23rd of March 1972, and I stress this was 2 months before I arrived in Tasmania, Richard Jones stood on that podium and introduced to this packed hall back then an evening, a public meeting over the cacophony of people brought in by the hydro to shout this meeting down. Lake Pedder was being flooded, and call for a vote for the establishment of a Greens party, then called the United Tasmania Group, and the majority of hands went up to form the Greens in Tasmania under the name of the United Tasmania Group, and that was as far as history can tell us, the world's first public meeting by the Greens, held in this hall 41 years ago tonight. And I'd like to recognise Patsy Jones, who was a driving force. We have our Greens leaders at state and level, and I'd like to just return the accolade. Christine Milne, Integrity Central. And I was asked a dozen times in the last 2 weeks who should be the person appointed to lead this country if the leadership, votes were going on in Canberra. And every time I had no trouble responding, it should be Christine Milne, Prime Minister for Australia. We have, of course, a history which is long, extensive and super productive these days, but we now got this film which gives us a little bit more of a recollection of days of past when the United Tasmania Group was established in Tasmania. Thank you very much. I'm sure the button's going to be pressed. I'll just keep talking. Nobody there. No, I won't. Oh, you in charge? I would play the piano, but I want you to stay here for the night. Dick came, I'd written a letter to the paper, The Examiner. It was a better newspaper in those days, and I wrote to him and just said voting for the lesser of two evils, the two big parties, is still voting for an evil. And it wasn't long after that Dick contacted me and said, would you like to stand for the Greens, the United Tasmania Group? Well, I was very shy about this. And finally, I decided I would, and in that election of 1975, I stood second to Dick on the Senate ticket and gained 199 votes statewide, which I thought was a pretty big number back in those days. We had 13 votes from Launceston, I remember. We were watching the count go up there. And, not everything went right. When I stood the next time for the United Tasmania Group in Bass for the state election, we got there too late to put our name on the top of the ticket. It's what's called a technical hitch, and every now and then you have one of those, no matter how well things are planned.
We're working on it. The universe works very slowly.
Brian says that the universe works very slowly. I'm told that it's accelerating. What I've found is that that's very likely to be true, because in my experience, as things get older, they accelerate, don't decelerate. I mean, I find life accelerating beautifully. So I think there's more than the universe and its trajectory at stake here.
The catalyst for my involvement with the UTG and the Lake Pedder Action Committee was the experience of Lake Pedder. It was, I think, the summer of 71-72 that I first went into Lake Pedder via the Coronets with a group of people. After we'd made camp, we sort of walked out into the evening on the sandy beach, and it wasn't very long before none of us were able to talk to each other. We were sort of choked up with the emotion of the place, and it's that emotion, I suppose, which was prevalent to a lot of people who went to Lake Pedder.
The people that I mixed with at the time that were involved in Lake Pedder, they saw Lake Pedder as an icon, as a special place, and being there was special too. It was a sort of, you recognised it was very special. I guess it's the shape of the landscape, the water being so far inland, the size of the beach in summertime, you know, a big enough area to take the whole of the CBD of Melbourne or Sydney, much bigger than people realise.
Once Lake Pedder was inundated, it was unable to speak for itself.
As a result of getting involved in the Lake Pedder Action Committee, then people started to talk about the election, the forthcoming election, and how we could influence the election. And I mean, put simply, the best way to influence an election really is to get involved and to become part of the process.
Dick Jones was an ecologist, a scientist. He worked for CSIRO in New South Wales and then came to take up a position at the University of Tasmania. And it was he and other people that were involved in environmental issues that then decided that they would have to form a grouping.
People started to talk to other people and let's have a meeting and at the town hall and see how that process can be expanded on. And so a meeting was organised.
I think that they went there with the idea of creating something like the United Tasmania Group.
It was absolutely packed, including all there's a room at the back of the town hall which was open, and everything was just packed out. But we finally got in there, and my recollection is that there was a lot of people from the hydro there.
They sort of stood out like, policemen at a hippie rally or something,
It was a very volatile meeting. and lots of yelling and shouting.
And this was a bit unusual in Hobart at the time. You know, there hadn't been any, public meetings like that weren't often held. And it was really sort of old-style tub-thumping politics, I suppose, that had happened many, many years ago. After a number of speakers, there was questions from the floor, but Dick Jones moved from the floor this motion.
That we should take political action and that people should get together and get involved in the state election at the time. And he put the motion, but because I think we hadn't realised how many people were there who were in fact on the opposite side, they voiced their opposition to the motion louder than the people that were supporting the motion.
A lot of people felt this wasn't the purpose of the meeting and that felt they'd been sort of somewhat duped. And so it was really quite controversial.
So once he put the motion again and people suddenly became aware that the meeting was stacked, there was a huge shout. I mean, it could have lifted the roof off. It was huge to vote for supporting the idea of taking political action. Yeah.
But afterwards, people stayed behind to give their names and to sort of sign up for the election.
The general air in the town hall seemed to be one of optimism.
I think essentially we're trying to get an outcome for Lake Pedder. I don't think any of us saw what it would grow into.
Together, and more of that to come, because we're collecting it very rapidly. And if you were at that first meeting or one of those early meetings, please let me know. I'm very keen to collect people's recollections of that wonderful time. We've had at each of our 3 previous orations a prelude, a musical prelude, and tonight we're extraordinarily lucky to have with us one of Tasmania's great musical performers who's globally known, and I refer to Michael Kieran-Harvey, who's particularly renowned for commissioning and performing Australian music and Australian works. According to one critic from The Age, few Australian pianists can touch Michael Kieran-Harvey, one of the most exciting exponents of contemporary music in the country. And he lives amongst us. His performance, I think, we hear too infrequently, but tonight we've got this treat of Michael playing from the Tasmanian repertoire for us. He'll speak about that in a moment. Michael tells me he's next off to Rio de Janeiro, and it's our great fortune to have him with us on the grand piano tonight. So ladies and gentlemen, give a hand to Michael Kieran-Harvey.
Talk for too long. I don't want to hold up the main game, and it's. I just wanted to say it's an incredible honour to be asked to perform here. I'm a great fan and have been for a long time of science, and the work of to be on the same platform as Brian Schmidt is just freaking me out at the moment. I am also very aware of the wonderful legacy of the Greens. So I don't. I feel a bit of an interloper, but the piece I'm going to play for you tonight is by one of Tasmania's greatest composers, still living, Don Kay. Would you mind standing up, Don? He may not feel like it after the performance. Standing up, that is. I just wanted to acknowledge, Don, this is a piece of music. It's the love theme from Don's opera, The Bushranger's Lover, which he wrote last year with the wonderful playwright and producer and writer John Honey, who's also in the audience tonight. And this is the love theme of the Aboriginal lover of the bushranger in the opera. It's only a very short piece. It's about 2 minutes duration. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you consider the wonder of having a Tasmanian opera being written, and I hope it gets played one of these days. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was just wonderful, and thank you, Don. You know, Alagus Trahanas, talking about Lake Pedder, said, is there any reason why Tasmania cannot produce a Sibelius or a Grebe? And was predicting things to come, and you two gentlemen are part of Alagus's vision of the future of Tasmania, and we thank you both for it. I've got a gift here which I'll bring you down. I'll be my personal delivery. Thank you very much. That's the Tarkine books from Chris Bell, which have just been out. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see a place of rapturous beauty, buy a copy of that book from the bookshop of your choice. But there we go, the Tarkine region, this wondrous region, which is, CNN US has just said, one of the great wild areas of the planet. In fact, the top remote wild area on the planet, within a week of our Minister for the Environment refusing it World National Heritage listing and leaving it open to the miners. We've got a long way to go. And I think if the UTG founders could have seen this back in 1972, they'd be shaking their heads and wondering. But we also tend to wonder, I think, we tend to chafe a bit at the bit. We tend to we tend to want things to change too fast. And if you look at human history and the great movements for change, they took a long time from their inception, from the people who had the vision, through to the change in the whole of the way society thinks. Brian and I were talking about this just this afternoon. It takes a long time. And I think what we're seeing, and Tasmania can take great pride in this, is an acceleration of the view that we must come to terms with the ecological wonder of this planet, which is just the right distance from the sun to have allowed the life and the awareness and the beauty of our own ability to think, and potentially the disaster of that same ability, which so far as we know, and I might be contradicted very shortly about this, so far as we know, this planet is the only one with reflection in the whole of the universe. But in talking about the time it takes, it's 13.7 years since the Big Bang, and here we are reflecting on the universe. And with us tonight, we have Professor Brian Schmidt, who in 2011 was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics, shared with two others, for demonstrating that instead of the planet decelerating in its expansion, it is in fact accelerating. I'm a junkie when it comes to knowing what the universe is about, where we've come from, what we're doing here, and what's happening in the universe, and where it and us may be going to. And anything that sheds light on that, I'm very, very keen to hear. After all, we're just a part of this great universe of ours. And tonight we have one of the great thinkers in the human community of 7 billion on this one little planet, which so far as we know is thinking. And that's a very great honour for us here in this Hobart Town Hall. I'll just read from Wikipedia. Brian Paul Schmidt, AC, FRS, was born on February the 24th, 1967. He's a distinguished professor, Australian Research Council Laureate Fellow and astrophysicist at the Australian National University Mount Stromlo Observatory and Research School of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and is known for his research in using supernovae as cosmological probes, something to do with exploding stars. He currently holds an Australian Research Council Federation Fellowship and was elected to the Royal Society in 2012. Schmidt shared both the 2006 Shaw Prize in Astronomy and the 2011 Nobel Prize in Physics with Saul Perlmutter and Adam Rice for providing evidence that the expansion of the universe is accelerating. I can tell you, besides his extraordinary career as an astrophysicist, Brian, who was born in Montana and schooled in Alaska, confided to me today that he has a hankering one day to live in Launceston. I'm telling a Hobart crowd that's something good. And we'll be going out to see some of the largest living beings on this planet, in this universe, tomorrow in the Sixth Forest. But before we get there, I know that you're all waiting to hear what Brian can tell us. And I thank you for coming, Brian. I thank you for the presentation we're about to hear. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to help me welcome to Hobart Town Hall for the fourth Green Oration, Professor Brian Schmidt.